Okay, now
Okay.
we're gonna do today's blot, because today's blot is Lamed Beis. So I think we're back on the blot. Lamed Beis.
Ernie, are we only talking about like non-permanent knots?
Yeah. Yes.
Meaning on Shabbos you can untie.
Yeah, but we're talking about non-permanent knots. The halacha Shulchan Aruch says clearly, Chos moisak shuris lekarka. You have these things that are tied to the ground, like doors that were tied to the ground. Yacholat tiran, you can undo it. Lefi she'enon kesher shel kayama. Exactly what Kenny was asking, because those kind of knots were not permanent knots. Aval osur lafkiach hevel, you cannot remove the rope from completely or cut it, unless it was done lechatchila, not lekayim. And by kalim, you can cut them and be mafkia them on Shabbos and certainly on Yom Tov. Huda Amar Ki Haytana, the Tanya. Now we're on Lamed Beis. Chos Meshubekarka Matir. You're allowed to undo these ropes on that are connected to doors. Avalo mafkia v'lo choytech. You can only undo. You can't uproot or cut. Echad Shabbos v'echad Yom Tov. So that's the Tana, like our Tana, it was more machmir. V'shebekli v'shebeshabbos matir. On Shabbos you can undo. Avalo mafkia v'lo choytech. And then on Yom Tov by Kalim matir mafkia v'choytech. So Tarat l'charesh on the Seifa Kasha. Hamani Rav Nechemia. The Seifas is also more machmir. That's because it's from Nechemia. The Omar. From Nechemia in the debate that we always had in the Masechta Shabbos between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon regarding muktzah, Rav Nechemia was even more stringent regarding muktzah. He allowed only specific use of a kli for that specific use. Rav Nechemia, you want to touch a kli on Shabbos, got to be for its specific designated use. So, Rav Nechemia, why would you make a distinction between Shabbos and Yom Tov? Ma'ir Yishavil Yom Tov Nami. All the dinim of muktzah apply to Yom Tov as well, according to Rav Nechemia. Chitemia, maybe you'll tell me Shinli Rav Nechemia ben Shavuos Shabbos Shavuos Yom Tov. Maybe you'll tell me Rav Nechemia makes a chiluk between muktzah Shabbos, muktzah Yom Tov, and Mishanile. He doesn't. Vatani Chada. We have a price as masikin bekelim. You're allowed to light a fire. Let's say you have a wooden kli. So a wooden kli is not muktzah, so you're allowed to touch it and throw it into a fire if you need it to fire. But ein masikin b'shivrei kelim. Broken pieces you can't because they're muktzah. Tanya yidich masikin bein bekem b'shivrei kelim. Another price says you could use either. V'tanya yidich, and the third one it says ein masikin lo bekem lo b'shivrei kelim. Can't use any. And then, of course, we for the three brises, Mishnah loy kasha Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says he holds of muktzah, so that's why shivrei kelim you can't use, but you can use the other kelim since they're designated for some use. You can use it for a fire. The one that permits you to use kelim and shivrei kelim is clearly Rab Shimon, who does not hold of muktzah. And the last one, which you can't use kelim either, even though the wooden kli was not muktzah, because you could use a wooden kli for a salad bowl. But Rav Nechemia did not allow you to throw that in the fire because you're only allowed to touch a kli for its permitted usage, which is for a kli. So the Gemara answers straight Tanoi, leave it Rav Nechemia. Apparently, there was a machlokes Tanoim and how Rav Nechemia learned whether he was more machmir regarding Yom Tov or not. One said that the Shavuos Shabbos was the same as Shavuos Yom Tov, and the other said no. So this is a very soidistic sugya Gemara on the Indian of muktzah that we refer to in Masechta Shabbos here. I think we quoted this Gemara. Mishnah. In Porchsin Saner, you can't take a piece of clay because you want to pour some oil in there so that it'll be like a little bit of a candle. But Meishu Oisa Kli. You're making a kli on yontif, so you can't do that. Ve'inoisin pachamim b'yontif. You can't make coals on yontif. Because those kind of coals are used for goldsmiths. It's like a kli. Ve'in choytchin sapsila. You can't cut the wick because it's being mesak in the kli. Rav Yehuda says you can use fire to cut the wick. Now, man tana b'chizas ner manahu. Who's the tana that says if you make an indent in a piece of clay that it's a kli? Or Rav Yosef, Rav Meir. The tanya kli cheres me'emetz hamakabel tuma. When does an earthenware kli begin to have a shame kli that it would be makabel tuma? Nigmar b'lachto di Rav Meir. Rav Meir does not require you to fire it in a kiln. Once you made it in the base kibul, it's enough. And Rabbi Yeshua, I mean, no. You have to fire it in the kiln. So, L'chora, the Gemara wants to say that our Mishnah that says if you just take a clay dish and make a base kibul in it, that you can't do that because it's a cleave. It's from our Mishnah that we just, Bryce that we just quoted. By me mine, no, nothing doing. I don't accept that. Deal ma'atkan lekon Rav Meir Hassam, el the chazil kabula be'midi. When you make a kli cheres, it can be makabel something, fine. Aval hoch l'may chazi. But this thing that he made, what is that roy for? Well, it says it is roy. L'kabula be'pshit. You could put some pennies in it. You have some loose coins. You could put some loose coins in it. So in a chanami, it would be a kli. Ikedi Amri. Now, other people had a different Masorah how to learn this sugya. On Rav Yosef. Who was our Mishnah when we asked Man Tana de Psichas Ner Manahu? Rabbi Yezer Rab Tzadiki. This not Ilfosin Charonios. These are like plates, dishes that have not been finished. Because normally these things had a cover, and this kind of ilfis doesn't have a cover. So tahiris ba'oil ames. So if it happened to be in a room where there was a corpse, that kli would not get tumah because it's not a kli yet. However, tmeis b'maisa zav. If a zav carried it, it would become tummy because it has some use. Says the Tanakama. Rabbi Yezer Rab Tzadok Omer, no. After tahiris b'maisa zav, if a zav carried it, it remains tohar. Because it's not a kli yet. So again, the reason why he says it's still tohar, because it's got to be able to accept something. But in our Mishnah, when you made you took some clay and you made a dip in it, made a hole in it for a candle, what's it used for? And for the Gemara again, like Kabbalah Bepshit, you could put pennies in it. So it's not necessarily according to Lezer Rabtzak. Torah ain't poison saner. You can't make this kind of candle. You cannot make these ka'aros on yontif. He allowed to make these type of plates. My charonis, or maybe iranius, city ones, village ones, my iranius, or by a tsoichal kalaisa. Plates that belong to villagers. And they would use very, even kalim that were not fired up. They were not makbid that you have a finished kli.
Would you be chayiv kilkul if you broke one of these things on Shabbos? Probably not, because it's not a complete keli, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not a kli. If it's not a kli, you wouldn't be breaking the kli.
Yeah.
You can't make these coals that the goldsmiths use, pshita. I mean, of course you can't. My chazi. lemoistron l'ulroy lebo bayom. There were bathhouses, and you might think you could give it to the attendants of the bathhouses to help warm up the water, because you want to wash on Yontif. We would have thought it would be permitted. Remember, they made a gzeira for Shabbos, and they extended it to Yontif about going into a bathhouse. So it's not permitted. So the Gemara says it wasn't for washing. The koidim gzeira. It was just to go into sweat before the gzeira, because eventually they made a gzeira. You can't go in no matter what. After the gzeira, you can't go in for any purpose. We said you can't cut the wick. You can't use a knife. Why not? You're fixing a kli. So who cares? Or nami komisakin. If you use a fire, Mishnah said if you use a fire and do it, you can do it. Why? You're also being misakin mana. Oh, this is something else. You have two vessels filled with oil, and you have a string that connects the two. So if you burn the middle one, all of a sudden now you have two wicks, they're both lit, that you can do. And what's moichtin? It means there's a black part at the end of the wick. You can remove that so that you think that the wick will flame better. They said 6 halachas regarding wicks. Shloisha lahachmir, ushloisha lahakel. Lachmir goydinus lachatchila biyonta. You cannot make the wick by braiding it on yonta. Or you can't light it and then put it out in order for it to burn better. You can't cut them in two. You can sort of shape it a little bit with your finger. You can soak them in oil. Like we said, you have two candelabras with a string connected. You can burn them in the middle to make two different candles. Now, we mentioned a halacha, the name of Rav Nasan bar Abba Omer Rav. Many times, because you have a certain amoira that doesn't appear often in Shas, that he was mentioned regarding these Yontif Dika halachas. So the Gemara is going to give us all the various memras that Rav Nasan bar Abba said, and they included here. He said, Asirei Bavel Yorde Gehenim. The wealthy men of Bavel are going to end up in Gehenim. Why? Ki had Shabtai bar Marinas ikla Bavel. Shabtai bar Marinas was a traveler who went to Bavel. Boy Minayo Iska. He wanted to go into business with somebody. Therefore, the way they used to do it, they would borrow money from a wealthy man, and they would go into business. And they would share the profits with the guy who loaned them the money. The Lo Yavel, they know what he wanted to give him. Mizoni Mason, he wanted to get food. Nami Lozini, they didn't give him food either. Omar, he said, Hani Me'erev Rav Kos, these were not Jews. When they left Mitzrayim, an Erev Rav went with them. These Jews must not be the sons of Avram Avinu. If somebody has compassion on his fellow creations, you should know he's from Avram Avinu. If you see somebody who's cold-hearted, must be that he's not from Avram Avinu. That's one statement from Rav Nasan bar Abba. Whoever relies on somebody else for his parnasa, oilam choshech ba'ado, is schwarz for the oigim. Means he's got a black world in front of him. Shenemar, noideru lalechem aya yoda ki nachon b'yodo yom choshech. He doesn't know where his bread's going to come. That's bad thing to be in. His life's not his life. Three people, their lives are not their own. Eluhin. Somebody who relies on somebody else for his parnas. Somebody whose wife rules him. Number three, somebody who has a lot of suffering. Somebody who only one pair of clothes and he can't keep them clean. He gets lice. Tanakama after the mind money, but Tanakama doesn't include that. Says even somebody with one pair of clothes can keep it clean, and he can prevent lice. Mishnah. Ein shoyvinus acheres. You cannot break a kli cheres. For example, you want to fry up some fish, and you think you can break up a kli cheres or cut up some paper. So that you can't do. You can't do it with paper. You cannot like clean out in your ovens things that fell into the coals. It's being masak in the mud. It's being masak in a kli. And we learned that the Chachamim argued with Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds even you can be masak in machshir oichel nefesh, but the Chachamim disagree. Aval mechabshin, you can smooth out the ashes. You can't pull two barrels together and then you want to put between the barrels a dish and then you'd have a fire underneath it because you're creating like an oil. You're like doing a binyan. Same thing. You can't balance a dish between two pieces of wood or on a door. You cannot, in Rishus Harabim, drive an animal with a stick on Yontif. Because the stick is used only for fuel. I guess you didn't prepare it for Erev Yontif, then it would be Moktzah. Rab Shimon Matir. Now, my timer, why can't you do this grifasa, the shviras acheres and the chituch niyorim? What's wrong? Mishum de kumasakin mana. You're making a kli or fixing a kli. Vein gorfin ton of a kirayim. You can't clean out your oven. Tani Rav Chia Bar Yosef Kamed Rav Nachman v'miyevcher le'eflois alim ken gorfel muter. On the other hand, if you cannot bake or cook unless you did it, then it's permitted. And the Gemara gives us some stories. A brick fell into her oven. He said it just a hint. He said, make sure I have good bread this yontif. Basically, it was hinting there, you can take the brick out because you're not going to be able to bake it properly. Rava said to his servant, Tvili Baravs, I want a good fat goose cooked. Make sure you don't burn it. So he gave him a hint that you can remove from the oven things that are going to interfere in proper cooking of the goose. They would seal up the oven with mud or clay so that it would cook well. He says the reason that there's a problem, why isn't that considered like you're making dough, like you're lush? So it says because he didn't have to they took it from the mud of the Euphrates, which was ready to go without any further preparation. But it's mutter when you designated this clay from Erev Yontif, because otherwise it would be muktzah. On Ravina v'kit bashori, but you're going to use ashes. Again, there's no gibul and lisha regarding that. It would be permitted. Then ve'makif and shtei chaviyos. You couldn't put two barrels together. On Rav Nachman, avonim shel beis hakisei muter l'tzadim yontif. Let's say people would take two rocks, put them next together, and you would sit on that to go to the bathroom. So you're allowed to prepare those rocks on yontif. But we just said you cannot bring two barrels together to put a kli on top of it. You're making a binyan. So the Gemara is going to ask the obvious question. So why can you put these two stones together? By the two barrels, and you bring a kli, you made an oil. So Armalei Rava Zuta Ravashi Lamiata Bona Itztava Beyond of the Loy Ovid Oyala. Like it says in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Simchas Beis HaShoava, they would build an Itztava. An Itztava is like a platform. How were they allowed to build that on Yontif? If you can't do it because of an oil, why is that permitted? Or Hachanami Bono Itztava Beyond the Loy Ovid Oyala. Well, you don't make an oil. Are you going to tell me that's permitted? So Amarlei Hasam Binyan Keva Asra Torah. So building the Itztava is like a permanent building. So that's Asr. But building something temporary, being a roy lo Asra Torah. However, Gazra Rabban being a roy should be in Keva. The barrel, the two barrels with the dish on top of it is a temporary oil. So that's a Gezerah. Because if you allow that, you're going to allow building a permanent. But going to the bathroom, because of the covet of the human being to go to the bathroom, they wouldn't make a gzei regarding that. And I'm adored to when you're building a bonfire, you cannot build up the wood from the bottom up like a binyan. You have to somehow start from the top and then build from below. When you're piling up eggs, if you're piling up pots, mattresses or beds, and barrels. When you organize it, you got to do the same thing. You can't do it from the bottom up, you got to do it from the top down. Okay. So tomorrow,